Hey everybody, how's it going? Today we're going to be going over and showing you how to install the Aries ActionTrac running boards here on our 2014 Ford F-150. So these are what our running boards are going to look like installed when we have the mechanism retracted. So off first glance, what you're going to see, we have a nice durable powder coated finish. It's really going to help these running boards do a great job of resisting rust and corrosion. Now, a lot of running boards, because of where they're located underneath the vehicle here, they're going to be subjected to a lot of road conditions, a lot of bad weather. So if you're in a state that uses salt, these things can really get eaten up pretty dang quick from that salt. However, we really shouldn't have any issues here with the ActionTrac because, again, we have this nice durable powder coated finish that is throughout the running boards as well as the brackets. So really no part of our running boards here, the installation kit, the board should really have any issues with rust or corrosion. So the ActionTrac running boards, they're not the only motorized running boards on the market. There's another pretty common set. However, I really think the ActionTrac beats these guys out because, number one, the main thing here is that the motor for the ActionTrac is actually going to be encased here. Therefore, it's not going to be subjected to the elements that we're going to see with an item mounted on the underside of our vehicle here. So therefore, the longevity, the reliability of the ActionTrac here is going to far surpass the competition. So what do motorized running boards do? Well, it's kind of obvious, but essentially, when we open our doors, we're going to have an additional step here. So what this additional step does is, it's going to provide us even more aid getting in and out of our truck here. Because it's going to be sitting much lower to the ground, we don't have to step up as much to get to that first step to help us get into our truck. So it's no secret nowadays with trucks, they keep making them taller and taller, meaning they're going to sit higher up and up. So it's going to be more difficult to get into our truck. But with this lower step here, it's definitely going to help us a lot more, even more so than just a normal set of Nerf bars or running boards. So here you can see a little bit better how much we really have here before we have to get to that first step. It's not much at all. We really don't have to jump up at all, as opposed to up here would definitely be a little bit more of a step. So it's going to make it a heck of a lot easier to get in and out of your truck. Maybe your wife isn't as tall, you have some elderly family members that are getting in and out and they need a little bit more assistance. It's going to be super easy for them to get in and out of your truck. So we obviously can't be driving down the road with that step as low as it is, but since they're automatic, they're going to retract back up into the body there. We're not going to have to worry about any decreased ground clearance issues. So if we take a closer look at the surface of our running boards here, you can see we have sort of these grooves and channels. And what this is going to do is it's really going to help us get a pretty good bite of our shoes on these boards here. We're not going to have to worry about slippage. So normally on a dry day, it's probably not as big of an issue as it would if it's winter time, you have salt, snow, even mud or water if it's raining. These surfaces can tend to get a little bit slick because we have all this debris piling up on top of the board. These channels here are going to help separate that debris and give you some good bite with your shoes here so you don't have to worry about slipping. So convenience is a pretty big factor with our running boards here. Everything is going to be automatic. They'll open and close with our front and rear doors on either side there. So we don't have to worry about hitting a switch or a button each time. Everything is automatic. But there will be some times where you may not necessarily want the running boards to attract each time you're getting in and out of your truck. And we can actually cut off the system there so we can open the doors. We don't have to worry about the running boards. Maybe we're parked at a campground. We're just getting in and out of our truck to grab some things. We don't necessarily need to use our running boards. We just go ahead and hit that kill switch. That'll turn off the motor. We don't have to worry about them activating each time we open our door. And then you can just simply turn it back on when you need it. So another nice feature I like about these running boards, we actually have a pretty bright built-in LED light. We have one on each side, and it's going to assist us when we're getting in and out of our truck at night, so we can make sure we don't miss the step and hurt ourselves. So the ActionTrac running boards, they are made of aluminum, so we're really not going to have any issue at all with rust or corrosion. They're also going to be a little bit lighter when we're getting them on and off the vehicle. They come with a lifetime warranty, and they are made here in the USA. Now, in regards to installation, it's actually not as bad as it may seem. Physically mounting the running boards onto the vehicle is probably the easiest part. It's definitely not hard at all. There's no drilling or modifications required. I would say the most time-consuming part of the install, not necessarily difficult, is just running the wires to and from each of the door switches, to the running boards, and then to the battery. It's definitely something you guys can do at home. Just make sure you give yourselves a little bit of time. We'll go ahead and walk you through this process now. So to start our installation today, if your truck actually came with the factory running boards or Nerf bars, we'd obviously have to remove those. But once we have those out of the way, we can go ahead and begin the installation of our new Nerf bars. So what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our brackets and our hardware. So we're going to get 6 brackets in our kit. We're going to need 3 of these per side. They're all going to be the same, so we don't have to worry about the left or right hand side or the front or rear brackets. They are all the same, luckily. So we want to go ahead and get our brackets ready, and then we're going to get our hardware ready. For this first step here, we're going to be using these little clip nuts here that comes in our kit. We're going to need a few of them here. We're going to start at the rear. Doesn't matter which side you start on. The instructions call for starting on the driver's side. We're going to come over here to the passenger side though. We're going to be starting with this rearmost bracket, just to give you a little bit better idea of where we're at once we're under the vehicle. So here is going to be our attachment point. We're going to see we have this rectangular hole here, along with 2 holes on either side. We're going to take one of our clip nuts. We're just going to go ahead and insert it through the large rectangular opening, and then slide that into the hole there. You should hear it clip in place. We're going to have one of those on each hole. And once we get those in, we're going to take one of our brackets here. Now there's going to be 2 different sides of the bracket. You can see here we have this angled portion. We have this little gusset welded here. So basically the bracket's going to sit up on the pinch weld like so. This flat portion here is going to line up with a set of holes on the bottom side of our pinch weld. So we're going to go ahead and just roughly set it into place now. And then we're going to have these 2 oblong holes on either side of the bracket. We're going to be securing the bracket to those clip nuts that we just inserted. So we're going to take one of our hex nuts that comes, or our hex bolt that comes in our kit here. Here's maybe a different color depending on which ones they gave you. We're going to install a flat washer and then a split lock washer over that. We'll simply just use that, thread it into the clip nut to secure our bracket. We'll do that on the other side as well. But once we get this one in, since we're working on the rear, we'll just repeat that same process for the front bracket. The middle bracket is a little bit different, so we'll show you that one. So here we're about the middle, which is about probably the rear edge of the driver door here. So the middle attachment point is going to look like this. We're going to have, again, our rectangular opening, but we're only going to have one small hole here in the top. So we'll just take one of our little clip nuts here and place that through the rectangular opening and into the hole like so. So you'll notice here on our bracket, we have a center hole as well. So for this middle one, we're only going to be using one attachment point there for the top of the bracket. So now that we have our top attachment points installed, we're going to go ahead and secure the bottom part of the bracket to the pinch weld. If you look on the bottom side of the pinch weld, you're going to see we have these pre-drilled holes here. And if we have the bracket positioned correctly, it should line up with the holes in the top of our bracket here. So we're going to take our hex bolt that comes in our kit here. We're going to place a flat washer over that. And then we're going to push forward on the bracket to line up the holes. Then we can insert our bolt through. On the top of that, we're going to follow this up with a flat washer and then one of our lock nuts. We'll do that same thing on the other side of this bracket. And then once we get these 2 in, we'll obviously just repeat the same process for our other 2 brackets as well. We actually have an additional bracket that we need to install for our light. That's actually going to go on the rear bracket here. We're going to be using the inside bolt. So if you already installed it, it's fine. You can just go ahead and take it out. Or if you haven't got to this point, you started on the front. Either way, we need to insert this, but it's super simple. I'm going to go ahead and just place the bracket over our bolt, and we'll slide that up through the hole there. And again, just secure it with the flat washer and lock nut. So now that we have our brackets installed, we're going to go ahead and do some partial assembly here to our Nerf bars. Now it does matter which side it goes on. We want to make sure that our Aries logo here is going to be facing the front. So once we've determined what side our Nerf bar goes on, we want to go ahead and flip it over. Because once we flip it over on the back side here, we're going to see we have these two distinct channels here. So we have a top channel and a bottom channel. For this next part here, we want to make sure that we're using the bottom channel. We're going to take these little bolt plates that come in our kit here. We have 3 of them because we have 3 brackets. We just want to go ahead and roughly slide these into the channel here. Sometimes it can be kind of tight. You may need to hit it in with something to get them to go, but they should slide in there pretty easy once you get them started. So we have 3 of them again. I'm going to install all 3 of them. And once I have all 3 of these in here, since we sort of have the Nerf bar roughly lined up here on the cab, we're just going to roughly line up our bracket location as well. So you can see we have our nuts here. They're going to roughly line up with our bracket there. So now that we have these nut plates, we're going to go ahead and set the Nerf bar as best we can onto our brackets here. It'll definitely help if you have an extra set of hands. You should, however, be able to do it yourself. The top channel here is actually going to grip into the top of our bracket. We'll kind of do our best we can to show you that. So once we have it in the channel, we shouldn't have to worry about it falling, but we should just have to make our adjustments here. These bolts, line them up with the brackets. Once you get all 3 sets lined up, you should see it actually go into position. So now that we have the bolts lined up with our bracket here, we're going to go ahead and place a flat washer over the bolt, and we'll just loosely thread on one of the lock nuts. We'll just simply repeat that same process for the remaining bolts. So now that we have our Nerf bar on, we want to go ahead and make sure we sort of get it centered here. Now it really doesn't matter, it's just sort of preference, but I just went ahead and made sure that we sort of stopped at the end of the door here at the front, and I stopped at the end of the door on the rear there. So that's pretty much the best location I found. But again, it is a little bit of preference where you want your running boards located, or rather your Nerf bars. One thing I do want to mention is you want to make sure that you maintain the same distance or the same spot as you are on the driver and passenger side. So it may be worthwhile just to take a measurement here from the front of the wheel well here to the point where our Nerf bar sits, and just make sure it's the same on the other side. So now that we have our Nerf bar adjusted, we're going to come underneath the vehicle here. We're going to go ahead and begin tightening down our brackets. We're going to start with the top 2 bolts here. So we're going to use a 13mm socket. We're going to tighten these both down across all 3 of our brackets. And now that we have our top bolts tightened, we can go ahead and tighten down the bottom bolts here, securing it to the pinch weld. We'll need a 13mm wrench and then a 13mm socket as well. So when we tighten down this inside bolt here on our last bracket, or the one closest to the rear wheels, we want to make sure that the bracket is sort of pointing inside there to the actual Nerf bars. And then once we have all of our brackets snug down, we can go ahead and secure the nuts that are attaching the Nerf boards to the brackets. And now that we have everything tightened down, we'll just go ahead and repeat that same process on the other side of the vehicle, and then we can move on to the wiring. So to start our installation for the wiring, the first thing we're going to do, we want to get everything out of our cab, as much removable stuff as we can. And then we're going to go ahead and fold up our seats to give us more room to work. The next thing we're going to do is, so you can see we have these little threshold panels here. They're going to be under each of the doors. When we close it, they sort of sit here. We need to go ahead and remove all 4 of these, the 2 for the front and the 2 for the rear. So we could normally just like pull them out, but we want to be careful not to stress the plastic too much. So if you have a trim panel tool, any sort of pry tool we can use to get under the panel and get close to the attachment clips, we can sort of use that to free them. It doesn't put as much stress on the plastic. What we don't have is great a chance of breaking anything. So we're just going to get our pry tool under there and just work it along the length of the panel here, just freeing up those clips. So you can have it out. This is what it'll look like on the bottom. We may or may not pull the little yellow protectors out with it. They may stay on there. That's totally fine. But now that we showed you how to get this one out, we're going to let you guys go ahead and remove the other 3 panels. So now that we have all of the threshold panels removed, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to be running wires over here from the driver to the passenger, or from the passenger to the driver, whichever way you want to look at it. So we're actually going to be running these under the carpet here. So there isn't really anything holding the carpet down, but to make it a little bit easier to pass your wires through, what I went ahead and did is I took a 2x4 and I just sort of propped up the carpet there and just pushed it all the way through. As you can see here, I have a nice little channel that we can use to run our wires through. So then the next thing we're going to do, we're actually going to take the main wiring harness that comes in our kit here, and as you're going to see, there's several different pigtails on there, different lengths of wire. There is a pretty good illustration in your instructions that show you where each of those things go. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that, even right now if you can, just to help you follow along a little bit better. But essentially, we're going to be looking for the end of the harness, which is going to have 2 connectors on there. It's going to have a black and a red wire, and then it's going to have 2 brown wires, a dark brown and then a light brown. So those are going to be here for the driver's side and the rear. So we're going to need to isolate those 2 pigtails from the rest of the wiring harness, and we'll show you how we have them attached here to our running boards. We're on the driver's side directly under the rear door here. So there's going to be an existing grommet in our frame right here. We'll give you a little bit better view of that up top next. But there'll be a grommet here. We went ahead and enlarged this grommet because it wasn't quite big enough to pass our connectors through. I just took a step-up drill bit and just went ahead and drilled that out a little bit. And then the 2 pigtails that we identified earlier, we have this pigtail here with the red and black wire, and we have this pigtail over here with the 2 brown wires. We went ahead and passed those down through the hole that we enlarged. And the one with the red and black connector here, that's actually going to go to a connector that's installed on our Nerf bars. It's going to have a pigtail on the end that mates up with that. It's going to have a red and yellow wire. So that connects to that. And then our other wire here, or other connector rather, that's actually going to go to an LED light that comes with the kit. So if you remember earlier, we mounted a light bracket here on our actual bracket for our Nerf bars. We went ahead and attached the LED light to this. It's pretty simple. We can show you a little bit closer view of that now. So here you can see we have our LED lights. Here was the bracket we installed earlier. You can make any adjustments to that as needed. But essentially we have a jam nut on the back of here. You're just going to have to loosen that to get it off the threaded portion, and then you can actually pass it through the little opening in the bracket here. Then you'll just use a 14mm wrench. You want to be very careful that you don't over tighten this jam nut, because you can actually break the LED. So you want to make sure you just get it nice and snug, but don't over tighten it. You can see the wire just ran back here to the pigtail that we showed you earlier. And then we actually just used 2 ring clamps here with some self-tapping screws, screwed them into the inside of the body here just to help our wires from falling down. So we talked about that grommet a little earlier. Now here's where it's going to be located. So we have the threshold panel off. We have this little side panel here. We don't need to remove it. We are just going to lift it up a little bit, like so. And then we can kind of see it. You may need to pull back this wiring harness, but the grommet is pretty much going to be located right down in there. So it wasn't too hard to get our drill bit in there. And once we drilled out the hole and stuck our wires through, we just took some silicone sealant and make sure we sealed that back up so we don't let any air or exhaust gases escape back into the cab. So the next thing we did, we went ahead and mounted our sensors here, which we're going to install right underneath the latch on the body side, so on the truck side, not on the door side. So these are pretty easy to install. You're going to have some double-sided tape that comes in the kit here. You'll simply just put that on the back of the sensor. You'll clean off the surface that it attaches to real well. You'll go ahead and stick it on. In regards to the location, you're going to want to install it directly under our latch here. So you can see this is how we have it oriented. And then in regards to the wiring harness, we went ahead and just peeled back the weather stripping As you can see here, we kind of pinched it into the pinch weld there to hold it in place. And there's actually going to be a connector on here which is going to match the ones on the harness for this side. So you're going to have two pigtails over here on the driver's side. They're going to have different color wires. They're going to be 2-pin connectors. We'll have 2 of them here for the driver's side. One of them is going to be a blue and brown connection. The other one is going to be a yellow and brown connection. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we verify which goes to which, because one goes to the front, one goes to the rear. And again, I definitely recommend that you have your wiring chart that comes in the instructions on hand so you can make sure you get it in the correct location. But we're going to run one of them down here to the door switch here on the rear, and then we're going to run one of them to the front. We'll show you that next. We're actually going to need to attach one of our extension harnesses in our kit here to extend the wiring harness from the rear to the front of the vehicle. So here's what one of those connectors looks like that attaches to the door sensor. So this is going to be for the front one, the yellow and orange that goes up to the front door here on the driver's side. And here's the extension harness that we talked about. So you're not going to get enough wire lead here to run it all the way to the front. So you're going to have your extension harness in your kit here. We just went ahead and ran it under this little panel here to the front door. We'll show you that now. So here you can see we have our sensor installed for the front driver door. We just did it the same way that we just did the last one. Cleaned off the surface real well, used some double-sided tape, and then passed our wire back through this little weather stripping panel here. Then on the back side of this panel here, we made the connection to our extension harness. I do want to keep in mind that these door sensors, it doesn't matter where you place them, they're all going to be the same. You just want to pay attention to what color wires you're connecting them to on the pigtail. So now we got power to our Nerf bars, we got power to our LED light, and we have a signal running to both of our door sensors here on the driver's side. We're just going to simply repeat that same process over on the passenger side. There is one additional connection you need to make. We can show you that now. So the only thing that's going to be different here on the passenger side, you're going to have this large rectangular connector coming off part of your harness. And this is going to attach to our module box, which we see here. Comes in our kit. We'll simply just plug the two in together. Now ideally we'd want to screw this to the floor here, but I really didn't find a good way to do that. So what I went ahead and did is I actually just went ahead and tucked it up under the carpet and sort of on top of this panel here that rests below our seat. So it was a pretty snug fit up in there. I did have to reach my arm kind of far up there to get it in there, but it's pretty secure once you do get it up there, so I really feel that's going to be our best option. So the last two things we need to do, we need to run our power wires and we need to attach our switch. So you should have 2 remaining wire leads coming off your harness here. We're going to route those over through the driver's side underneath the threshold panel. So I came out underneath our panel here and I basically just have them tucked in beside the body here. We have an existing wiring harness sort of tucked by this plastic panel. So I just went ahead and ran it and used sort of these existing tabs here to hold it in place. You can kind of see our wires peeking through here. See, we have the 2 wires there. So one of these strands is going to have 3 spade terminals on there. That is going to run to our switch. You can see we have our switch mounted here. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to drill a 3/4 inch hole. We used a step drill bit, and this part on our panel here would be a perfect location for it because we don't have anything behind it. So we just went ahead and drilled our hole out, and then we ran our wires through that hole, attached them to the back of our switch. We do need to make sure of the order we're attaching our wires to the switch, because the 2 with the blue spade terminals on there go to the silver spades, and then the copper spade goes to the one with the red connector. So then we secured some of our wire here. We want to make sure that we stay clear of the parking brake cable release, or the hood release rather. So we want to make sure that we zip tie it to some existing wires there so it doesn't fall and get in the way of this mechanism. So now that we have our switch hooked up, we have our final 2 wires with the integrated fuse holder on there and 2 ring terminals. That's going to run to our battery. So what we need to do next is we need to find a pass-through point through the firewall so we can get into the engine bay to our battery. Now over here on the driver's side, directly under the dash here, closer to the side, or the fender rather, there's going to be a very large grommet we can access. We just simply took a piece of airline tubing, sort of cut it at an angle so we could pierce a hole through that grommet. We pulled that through the grommet and we attached one end of our wires to the airline tubing. We taped them up, and then we used that to pull them up into the engine bay. let's go ahead and give you a closer look at that grommet we're using now. So here we can find our grommet, and again, all I did was take a piece of airline tubing and pierced it through that grommet. You may need to use a razor blade knife, but be very careful that you don't pierce any of the wires. So down here is where our grommet comes out as far as the engine bay. You can see we have our wire here, rather two wires that have this like little sheathing on it. But we need to go ahead and run these over back to the passenger side because that's where our battery is located. We have this little cubby hole here in this little panel. So I actually just went ahead and put our wire through there, and I use this panel here to provide some protection to run it over to the passenger side. So here we have our wire coming out of that little cubby hole that we explained earlier. So as you can see, it changed colors, and the reason it did that is we actually had to extend our wire. Now generally we really don't want to extend the wire with this harness, but we couldn't reach where the battery was, so we didn't really have a choice. But if we are going to extend it, we want to make sure that we use a larger gauge than what presently came in the harness. So we used a pretty thick wire here. So we use that to run the wire to the existing battery here, the existing rest of the way. You can see we have a couple zip ties along the way, just securing it to some various harnesses that are already in the engine bay to again just keep our wire in place. So then for this next step, if you did extend your wire, you'd want to make sure to go ahead and reattach the fuse holder with the ring terminals. I will say that if you are extending your wire, you need to make sure you do so before the fuse holder, not after. But you want to make sure that your fuse isn't inserted for this next step here. But then you'll just simply go ahead and attach your two leads to the positive and negative battery terminal. The red goes to positive, black goes to negative. Most batteries are going to have a 10mm nut holding on one of the terminals here, or rather you'd need a 10mm wrench for that nut. You just remove that, attach your two wire leads, and then you're good to go. So the last thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and install our magnets here for the sensors. So the best way to do this is just actually go ahead and take the magnet. Don't yet install that 3M double-sided tape that comes in our kit. Just take the magnet and place it on the door here. I'm going to make sure you clean the surface real well, but we're going to place it here. Now it's kind of hard to do this because basically you're trying to align this magnet here with the sensor we installed earlier in the door jamb. So really what we found the best place to be is, you can sort of see these 4 bolts here, or 3 rather. We have these 3 bolts, they're sort of spaced evenly apart. I just did my best to match the bolt here with the magnet. So if you can kind of see what I'm talking about here, the spacing should be equal between these 2 bolts, this bolt and this magnet. Now you don't need to be dead on, but you want to be as close as possible. So I just went ahead, placed the magnet on the door, and then I shut the door, inserted the fuse, turned the system on, opened the door, and if the running boards, or rather the Nerf bars, extended out, we know we have the magnet lined up correctly. Then I just went ahead and made a mark in the center of the magnet here, took it off, installed the double-sided tape, and then permanently attached our magnet. And it's a good idea to go ahead and test again to make sure you have the correct location. But we'll go ahead and repeat that process there on all of our doors. So now if we've done everything correctly thus far, when we open our door, we should see the Nerf bars extend out. And they should also close when we shut the door. There is a little bit of a delay. We're going to go ahead and repeat that same process here, testing each of our 3 doors to make sure we had everything installed correctly. But once we've ensured we have, that'll complete our installation. And that's going to do it today for our look and installation of the Aries ActionTrac running boards here on our 2014 Ford F-150.